Beneath the glittering neon oasis of Las Vegas, under a city that dazzles millions with luxury hotels, casinos, and endless nights of entertainment, lies a hidden reality almost no visitor will ever see. A secret, sprawling underworld carved into roughly 200 miles of flood control tunnels, a shadow realm inhabited by the so-called mole people, men and women who haven't tasted sunlight in months, sometimes years, and in some cases, were even born into this underground darkness, living 7 floors below the city where police radios can't reach, emergency services can't operate, and civilization feels like nothing more than a distant, flickering rumor from above. These tunnels, long and claustrophobic, are named like neighborhoods by their inhabitants, some joking, some territorial, some deadly serious. And while the tourists stroll overhead drunk on freedom and fortune, down here the air stays still, wet, and cold, carrying the echo of voices and the sound of cars rolling on pavement just a few feet above the heads of the forgotten. On the surface, Las Vegas glows with $15 billion casinos, immaculate fountains, and endless buffets, but below, the tunnels twist like the arteries of a darker organism, forming a labyrinth where a wrong turn can swallow you whole, a place where the darkness is so complete it begins to alter the mind, twist perception, and erode the boundaries of time, sanity, and self. Even our guide, Rob, who survived 5 years in the tunnels, warns that we cannot step inside without him, not only because the entrance is sealed with metal bars to prevent accidental entry and keep debris from flooding into the city, but because in these depths, we are entering someone else's home, someone else's territory, and trespassing in the dark can spark confrontations that become violent in seconds. When asked the worst thing that ever happened to him in these tunnels, he speaks of a massive flood that swept in without mercy, one that took the lives of 2 of his closest friends. Las Vegas soil is too hard to absorb rain, so storms 15 miles away in the mountains can unleash walls of water that rip through the tunnels within minutes, turning homes, makeshift furniture, and cherished belongings into instant debris, dragging everything and everyone toward the city's drainage systems. Despite the warnings, we proceed, stepping through trash and debris until we meet Nate, the first person to cross our path, who tells us he avoids the deeper parts of the system because the unknown down there grows tighter and darker until you're crawling in confined spaces where anything could be waiting, rooms carved out by previous workers, abandoned service chambers, sealed sections with no exit, and the ever-present threat of being kidnapped, killed, burned alive, or simply disappearing without anyone ever knowing. Toby, another longtime tunnel resident, has faced this danger head-on, recalling the time he was attacked by 3 men Cuban, he says, one wielding a machete, and how he defended himself with improvised weapons, including a handmade Molotov cocktail crafted from a basket and some spare fuel. As we attempt to navigate the tunnels, we call out anybody home, and search for flashlights in the oppressive darkness, eventually meeting a woman under the influence who asks for Narcan, the nasal spray carried by outreach teams to reverse opioid overdoses, giving victims a brief 30-minute window before help must arrive. But here help doesn't always come, and even the sound of footsteps or whispers can send a shiver through the senses, because in the dark, every noise is amplified, every shadow grows teeth, and the reality of danger never fully disappears. Down here, People navigate entire miles of tunnels without ever resurfacing. Those who know the system by memory can traverse it like a private highway, moving from passageway to passageway through a connected maze that stretches beneath casinos, parking lots, and the strip itself. As we continue, we hear the rumble of cars above and realize that thousands of tourists are driving right over the heads of people living in total darkness, separated from the world by a few inches of concrete. Then, in a rare moment, we approach a grate where sunlight spills into the tunnel, a brief portal to the city above, revealing the illusion of Las Vegas, a world that hides the suffering below as effectively as a stage backdrop hides actors behind a curtain. Through another grate, we see Caesar's palace looming just above us, creating a stark contrast between Nevada's billion-dollar casinos and the death traps beneath them, where moisture still clings to the concrete even after weeks without rain, the air thick with mold and the stench of sewage. Some tunnels channel water from the city's drainage system, and residents sometimes use the flow to bathe. Despite the contamination, other tunnels are silent, forgotten by everyone except the people who call them home. Without Rob, we would already be lost, because one wrong decision in these catacombs can trap you for hours, or forever. Along the way we see memorials, handmade crosses, and messages like "Rest in Peace," marking the spots where people were swept away by floods or died from overdoses or violence. We also see bikes everywhere down here. Bicycles are currency, transportation, and survival, so valuable that disputes over them can turn deadly. One man tells us he was struck in the head with a 2x4 over a bike, receiving 11 stitches from the attack. As we press forward, we meet Tony, whose voice echoes through the tunnel long before he appears. Tony has lived here for 6 years, and though his space looks like a pile of clutter to us, every item serves a purpose for his survival. He tells us how the community has shifted over time, how good people once shared the tunnels with kindness, but now many are ruled by addiction, rage, or hopelessness, some lighting fires that nearly took his cat's life. He shows us his makeshift bathroom, a 5-gallon bucket, and confesses that while he hopes to leave someday, he isn't sure he can, because the tunnels have become both prison and home. Deeper inside, without Tony, we continue our descent, the silence growing heavier as the darkness thickens, and the threat of encountering someone unpredictable looms like a presence walking just behind us. Some tunnel dwellers cook using aluminum pans and hand sanitizer flames, with rats skittering through the shadows. More voices draw us forward until we meet a woman who describes herself as cuckoo bananas crazy, explaining she came to Vegas to visit her mother, fell in love with a local, and ended up living in the tunnels for 5 years. She talks about the fear of darkness, how it presses on the mind like an entity of its own, suffocating and overwhelming. Scavenging is a way of life down here, dumpster diving, collecting cables, copper, and anything valuable, but many residents survive by grabbing items abandoned by drunk tourists who spend thousands in designer stores and lose track of their belongings during casino wins or alcohol-fueled celebrations. Beverly appears next, living 8 or 9 years underground, describing floods as horrific events she barely survived, and explaining how Vegas above is like wallpaper, designed only to look good, while those below remain invisible. Eventually we encounter a man who invites us into his tent, showing us the few belongings he has left. He moved to Vegas alone, lost his parents, and has lived in tunnels for years. He explains how he steals food when necessary, how he stays safe by staying alert, how he once saw a man shot twice, once in the back, once in the neck, collapsing in front of him with a shirt turning red. He describes hearing phantom footsteps outside his tent at night, only to find nothing there, and how people down here sometimes turn gray, losing pigment from years without sunlight, becoming ghost-like versions of themselves. With no ID, they can't apply for jobs, rent homes, or access services, effectively erased from society. Phil, another resident, once lived a normal life with a house and a pool, but retirement, financial decline, and misfortune dragged him below. He describes floods that reach 8 feet high within 10 minutes, with only the sound of rushing water to warn residents, and how many have died because the current never loses. Heartbreakingly, weeks after we interviewed him, Phil passed away. Moving forward, we see mineral deposits on the ceiling from water seeping through over the years, signs of repeated destruction. Puddles deepen, the smell intensifies, and the floor becomes a mixture of sewage, human waste, and decomposing animals. We press through until we discover an underground art gallery, bright, vivid colors painted on moldy gray walls created by Jay, who has lived here 8 or 9 years. He tells us he arrived in Vegas with only $27 after someone stole his luggage and ID, and that life in the tunnels means being robbed by both homeless people and the police. His space is organized with salvaged items, including toys, strollers, and furniture built from scraps. He showers using a 5-gallon bucket and eats thrown-out food. He was once shot in the head with a .45 and survived, though he remembers none of it. He also believes something supernatural haunts the tunnels. A tall, thin, black as night figure without arms or legs that mimics voices, moves objects, and drops the temperature when it appears. Asked about his future, he simply says he will likely be dead, because everyone is 2 paychecks away from being homeless. Farther still, needles litter the ground, the atmosphere grows more hostile, and another man tells us his family hasn't asked what he's doing in years. He was once a family man with children he hasn't seen in a decade. When asked the worst thing he's witnessed, he points to the ground and says someone overdosed right there just last night. This is the reality of a hidden city under the world's brightest city, where 7 out of 10 Americans living paycheck to paycheck could one day end up, where life is precious, short, and fragile. Eventually, we emerge near Caesar's Palace, realizing that just feet below one of the most iconic casinos in the world, a vastly different drama unfolds daily in the darkness, and while the world above indulges in excess, the world below battles for survival, identity, and dignity, unseen and unacknowledged. A stark reminder that every paradise casts a shadow, and in Las Vegas, that shadow is deep, dark, and alive.